Hey everybody, this is PD from the Spin Rack and continuing my new DC where the action is. So you didn't know more pages from the new DC. We get into this book called All-Star Squadron. Now, I think Roy Thomas exiting Marvel, and basically he was the father, even though he had some help from Neil Adams, the father of the sagas, of the multi-character, multi the multi-issue sagas with multiple characters all in one book, right? And All-Star Squadron was, because you could see, I think the Titans, I know the X-Men, Dave Cockrum kind of played with having the X-Men versus the Squadron, the Imperial Guard, and then you had Steve Englehart do some stuff with the Avengers and the Defenders. You had Byrne do at some point later, so you could feel that kids liked a book with 3 main characters, right? So I'm not sure how I'm going to go about this, but I can't do as much as I want to show for this thing because we have many different eras and different styles and different periods and different things to evoke. So I'm just going to go over some bits before I go into an actual arc, because you're going down a rabbit hole that's very dense, and there's, if you've seen some of the videos, it's hard to do an extra dense sort of thing. So I just want to give you, because at the time, if you see Crisis, which came after, would you see Secret Wars, and not to say that they have to mention All-Star Squadron, but it has this amount of characters. Never a book has given you this many characters of a series, right? Never a book has given you this many characters in a series. At one point, like here, you have the All-Star Squadron, the Justice League, and the Justice Society, all in this arc of Crisis on Earth Prime, Book 2. Now, I don't understand the difference between Earth 2 and Earth Prime, but we had a lot of things going. The book had a lot of things going for it. Even though it fell victim of Crisis, I know it might not have been the big sales, but at the same time, it had Roy Thomas and Rick Buckler starting it. Now, we had a lot of people who drew similar to Neil Adams. So we have in this book that starts out with sort of a Neil Adams cover. They're drawing a lot of characters, what we wish Neil Adams would do. So we got that in issue 1. And then if you're a fan of yesterday, we have Joe Kubert, who always, throughout his entire career, never fell off. Like, his style always held up, but gives you that tone of yesterday. And then we have a crossover, the Crisis crossover, before Crisis. So we have everything in this book that to do to be successful. Maybe it's not as many characters as the Legion, right? And the Legion had just done their own sort of saga at the same time. They'd done the Great Darkness saga. They brought in a lot of the characters. There were a lot of characters running around in the book. But this is kind of doing multiple teams grouped together, a little bit of banter and silliness and stuff. And so ultimately, in this, I think I had this as a kid. So I liked this, and I had maybe the first year, most of the first year of this book. And I immediately liked it. I didn't understand why Hawkman had that mask. I didn't really understand. I was just getting the understanding of Earth 2, but it was early on, so I knew this was in the past. right? So basically, these characters, something happened to the Justice Society, and we're gonna get met by these new characters, right? But we get a nice Neil Adams feel to this book, and Marvel was doing it, so it's also cool to have a DC book that was doing Neil Adams, since they're the ones that kind of, well, Neil Adams kind of forced his way in, and thankfully so. I love this shot here to this shot, so it kind of really had that Neil Adams feel. It might be a homage to him, but The Shining Knight was a favorite. Obviously, Solomon Grundy is cool. But we get to see, and then I met Per Degaton, and I was like, why? Well, I know there's a Justice Society movie. I gotta check it out. I don't know if DC or the animated series has done anything, but this is the guy you need to have in your movie. This is your. They had, I don't know if they, I don't think, I think he think he's a new invention, but I was a big fan of his in this from back in the day, right? And we have even Pearl Harbor, right? We got a lot of cool stuff in here, and I wasn't supposed to pull this one out. I was supposed to pull another one out. I thought I planned this perfectly, but it seems I have, oh, here. So in this one, the All-Star Squadron kind of take over. We hear that the Justice Society has been disbanded. We have this new villain, but the art has changed. Even though Jerry Ordway is doing the inking, right? The art changes. It's like Roy Thomas, it's Adrian Gonzalez, and Jerry Ordway. But it keeps the feel. It still has that Neil Adams feel to it. But Jerry Ordway would take the title in different ways. So he had some realism to his artwork, and he had some of this. So we get sort of the classic sort of stuff. We get some Neil Adams stuff. We get his ability to also do his own realism. Not necessarily Neil's realism, but he can do likenesses. Look at that right there. And we're just shifting. We're kind of pulling away from Neil Adams here slowly in this thing, but it's kind of a wall-to-wall characters with the backdrop of the World War in here, right? And here we have a crossover. This is another Degaton sort of thing. And we start out with a bang, right? We have the Squadron. And now the Squadron has taken on a lot of characters, right? So this is well beyond the X-Men. Like 5 characters is usually easy to handle. But having this many characters, you don't really get to do a lot of characterization. And Degaton is kind of taking the minds of the All-Star Squadron, but it also has, but this is a 3-part. This has the Justice League and the Justice Society, right? And it turns into a big, fight over everything, right? And we get Degaton's history. When does Justice League show up? I think they might show up at the end of this issue, right? But we get a lot of Degaton in this story, right? So, oh man, only 10 minutes. So lastly, what I wanted to do was this last arc, that because at some point Jerry Ordway takes over the art of the series, right? And he is joined by Mike Macklin, inks it. And their styles really mesh well. So we get kind of Ordway's tone, but Ordway still has some Neil in there. We're going to start to see his kind of style shine through, right? We get them, this nice shot of them in the World's Fair in Queens, right? And we get to see Ordway showing what he can do as far as facial expressions. It's cool. It's easier to do these wides with all these characters, right? And we get a nice battle here going on, right? Because they have to be tested before they can get into this layer, and they run into the Justice Society. We finally find out what happened because we lost them. We lost some Justice Society members along the way. We finally see that they're captured, and they're captured by this character, Brainwave, right? And he keeps them trapped and enthralled. And he shows that he can enthrall them with this stuff. And he shows all the places in their mind that they're stuck, right? So this arc is going to lead to another arc that's going to lead to more characters, right? So I'm not going to quick, because like if we didn't go through that whole issue, we have this, which might have worked better for the last issue, right? But it's a great splash page, right? And we have Jerry already showing what he can do. And we're back to where we were in the other issue. But it's well worth it, right? And this one, it looks like Jerry Ordway inked it himself, right? And we get some cool layouts here, giving you the history of what's going on. And the All-Star Squadron, because there's so many characters, I mixed them up. All-Star Squadron actually jump into the minds of the stuff that's going on, and then they go fighting in these areas where their minds are, right? And they all get killed immediately. And look at that shot here, right? So and this actually leads into some Oppenheimer stuff, right? So this actually leads to symbolism of Oppenheimer. So you get a lot of stuff like that in this series. So I don't want to give it all away. And when Superman shows up, he kind of has a Wally-Wood feel, right? We get another nice splash page. So if you're into this type of stuff, it's just you're not going to get too much time, like solo time with the characters, because there's so many characters. It's really hard to have those moments where we see in the X-Men or in the Teen Titans. Roy is just giving us a maximum amount of characters for a maximum amount of time, and this amulet is going to lead to something heavy. And I didn't understand when I was first looking at it, but we have the Sandman and a tarantula, right? So the tarantula looks almost exactly like the Sandman, and they're going to deal with that. And Mike Macklin is back. And its heroes split up for their adventure, and it leads to Ultra Humanite. We don't recognize him, but Superman can tell from the eyes that it's the Ultra Humanite, and his early adversary before Luthor, right? This is going to lead to some cool issues, which is this one here. But Superman is pretty much out of the picture for a while, right? We get another cool splash page, right? So the Ultra Humanite has this Power Stone, and he pretty much makes short, or she now, pretty much makes short work of the heroes. And that leads to a few other issues with where we run into some new characters in the Amazing Man. The Tarantula finally gets his own costume, right? And that leads us to where we have even more characters, right? So the Justice Society is running around in this book, and now we have Infinity Inc., who's from the present day, and to counteract the fact that John Byrne was using the Guardian, the DC people, they decided that, you know what, we need to bring back Guardian. We need to show him, because Byrne's using his Vindicated character is now called Guardian, right? So ultimately the Guardian shows up, right? So we get some nice shots here, the characters. So this, I mean, it's more enjoyable than, I say, Secret Wars, but it's a lot of characters. So, but if that's the thing, these days, all characters all the time, this is the book for you, right? And you got all this great Jerry Ordway art early on. Now imagine he came in like this. Like he came in with this amount of ability and basically hasn't lost it, right? I don't know if he's added, gained, or lost, but he definitely is a solid. But this end, I guess the Teen Titans had done it first, right? I think the Teen Titans had done. I don't know who did it first, but have a long story and have the end of the story being in the annual. Now, Marvel's annuals would have big stories. I guess who is it? I guess the Fantastic Four did it first, where the end story for Sue's pregnancy happens in the annual. So I guess Fantastic Four did it first, and then DC, or I guess the Titans, they would do their penultimate story, the finale of an arc, not penultimate because that's the second right before the last. They would do the finale of the arc in the annual, right? So for me, it was kind of a little too, doing that was like, all right, we know that the fans are out there and we're giving them a reason to buy an annual, where the annual used to just be a fun issue that had some pinups and another story or a big story, right? So, and this will be the end. Ultra Humanite, they've got Superman tied up, this amazing character. He's kind of tied in. We don't know if he's a hero or a villain yet, right? But we have yet another running scene where they have to carry the characters, right? So there's a little bit of romantic drama here with Firebrand and who is it, Johnny Quick and stuff like that. I mean, Jerry Ordway takes over this book, and I can't slight Rick Buckler because I liked his stuff, and I don't know if Adrian Gonzalez had done a cover, but his stuff is good too. The only weakness I would say is when Mike DiCarlo inks it, and his inking line is a little weaker. But ultimately, especially if you, I don't know what to say. I think Rick Howell takes over at the end of it, but ultimately, there's a lot of characters. But I remember buying most of the Crisis on Earth Prime, when I was a kid. I think the name changed to Crisis Time 5 or something like that. But yeah, this is a fun series. Doesn't get you that characterization that you would get that Roy actually did, like Roy would do in the Avengers or the X-Men. But ultimately, it's a fun book. It's a lot of characters. And these days, you got books with a lot of characters and a lot of things going on here. Not as many villains, like a matchup of villain versus heroes, but it's a very wall-to-wall character book that happened before Crisis, before Avengers versus X-Men, or Avengers versus JLA, Secret Wars, all that stuff. So it's kind of a book that had all the characters in it. Roy Thomas kind of doing the stuff he was known for with the Kree Skrull War. I think there's a bunch of wars that he did in many of his comic books. But it was bringing together multiple characters into one book, one sort of arc, right? And the All-Star Squadron has that. It comes from the All-Star Squad, which was an offshoot. I think they did something like this in the past, and then they did something like this in the 70s. So he took the name, instead of All-Star Squad, it's now the All-Star Squadron, right? And this leads to, I think, where Burns says something about Roy, but I think it was kind of, he says it was a kind of parroting something he heard from someone else. But ultimately, this leads to Infinity Inc. Because what's the name gets died out. Only other tidbit I can say, I don't know what else I can say here. Do I have a Infinity Inc. here? Thought I did. That must be over there. Sorry. This over here. Nope, that's not it. Excuse me. Oh, here we go. So we'd have this book that would be running kind of similar, because you saw they crossed over. This would be the book that I guess Todd McFarlane takes on at some point. But it was a continuation, and I don't think this has well, I guess you had the Justice Society in there from time to time, but they're much older at this time. So I guess that's about it. Spin rack out.